Hello everyone, welcome to Business Operations Week 2. This week we will focus on the economic environment. We will learn the fundamentals of how our economy is working and how, as business managers, our understanding of the external economic environment or the economic environment that our businesses operate in can enhance our way of managing the business. Of course, we will focus on the Canadian economy. We will learn the key economic influencers. What are the factors contributing to the economic development? What is the underlying economic model? We will also understand the factors that affecting the economic growth cycle. And we will learn the dynamics of the market and how we can manage the movement within the market. We will also learn about the current trends that's impacting the Canadian economy. We will learn about different competitive models. And this all together will enhance our ability to sense market changes. So the learning objectives of this week is to identify the major contributing factors that impact the overall economic development. We will also learn how to describe the underlying economic model that shapes an economy. We will discuss the concept of economic activity and how economies grow and contract. And also, we will discuss how managers can use economic information to better manage their organization. Of course, we will focus on the Canadian economy. Canada is a current member at the G7, G8 organization. And Canada is considered one of the most diversified and fully developed economies in the world. And this is due to several factors. The first one is the abundance of natural resources that the country possesses, and our skilled labor force, and the sophistication in the technology advancement or the technological advancement in general. Within the last few decades, we totally transformed from agriculture-based economy to a more diversified system with a large array of products and services. And there are key factors that are considered critical to ensuring that the Canadian economy remains resilient, like productivity gains, strong business environment, strong business investment, innovation, also a relatively moderate wage increases that still allow us to compete. We still have favorable currency exchange rates. Some specific products that driving the current economic and the trade performance, like crude oil, like other petroleum products and gases, gems and diamond, machinery, wheat, canola, and other agriculture-based products. We have abundance of metals. We also in Canada have demonstrated an ability to produce world-class competitive products. So if we now focus on the manufacturing side, we will find that although our economy was impacted in 2008 and 2009, and of course the renegotiation with the USA of the NAFTA agreement, this impacted the trade of the Canadian economy with a very, very important neighbor like the United States in 2018. But we still have some industries that are considered, Canada is considered world-class competitor, like telecommunication, aerospace, IT services, energy products and services, forestry related products and services, and of course the automotive sector. As I said, our economic relationship with our neighbor, the USA, is considered one of the most important relationships in the Canadian economy. So it's core to our economic activities, because the US is the largest trading partner. The trade is accounting for 73% of our external trade volume, and over 50% of our imports comes come from the USA. Although in the recent years, Canada was attracted to the international market, and the trade is evolving in favor to other countries. But right now, the USA is our biggest trade partner. As I told you, Canada is a current member at the G7, G8. And the G7-8 is a quasi-organization. Quasi-governmental organizations or quasi-organizations are organizations that have characteristics from both the private sector and the public sector. And we cannot fit this organization neatly in one category over another. This organization is run by a board of directors. It's composed of government officials or directors appointed by a traditional government. So the G8 consists of countries like the US, Canada, of course, Japan, Germany, Great Britain, and France, Italy. And in 2006, Russia became a member, and the organization transitioned to the G7-8. So the countries in this organization, they meet at least once a year, and in their meeting they discuss the major factors or trends that whether economic, political, societal, that affect the global economy. And also recently they invited other countries to attend the meetings, like China. Unfortunately, the impact or the role or the influence of the G7-8 organization is diminishing recently, because there are other organizations that include the countries in the G7-8 and other countries that started to have more impact and more presence and more influence on the global economy. Now let's focus on the Canadian economic system. We will find that the Canadian economic system is in a favorable state right now, with high productivity gains, innovation, a stable business environment, and strong investments. However, the Canadian economy is a relatively a petro economy. Over the past few years, so many economic analysts started to pinpoint the Canada's dependency on energy and commodity, like mining, natural resources, agriculture. So these sectors are the primary sectors that drive the overall economic growth. And this dependency makes when there is fluctuation or changes in the price of crude oil or commodities, this will have impact, immediate, significant impact on the stock exchange, for example, the market, on the Canadian dollar exchange rate. So when the price of the oil goes down, this will have a negative impact on the Canadian economy. And this aligned movement, when the prices of the oil and the stock exchange are totally aligned, it's because we earn most of our revenue from the sale of oil, specifically in US dollars. These sales, the oil sales, represent the biggest share of our foreign exchange. Canada is considered the fourth biggest crude oil supplier, and 99% of our supply goes to the US. So when the prices of the oil goes up, the flow of US dollars as a foreign currency increases. And this is what makes us a petro economy. Like the Gulf states, for example, like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. So these countries are petro economy as well. When we have a global, a strong increase in global demand on our crude oil, the prices goes up, and we might have a balance of trade surplus. So the trade surplus is the difference between the value of imports. It means the goods and services that flowing into Canada versus exports. Again, goods and services flowing outside or out of Canada. So when we have a surplus, we have exports exceeding imports. However, When the crude oil prices collapse, the prices are relatively low, and since then, since 2014, the oil prices are relatively low, and this negatively impacting the Canadian economy. And now we have deficit, we have trade deficit. So at one point we had a trade surplus because our exports exceeded our imports, and now we have deficit. And whether it's a deficit or surplus, when we consider the Canadian economy, unfortunately, the energy sector is the determining factor whether we will have a surplus or a deficit. It's a key influencer, and because energy accounts for 20% of the companies that make up the stock exchange index, with approximately another 20% of the companies work in materials, utilities, and industrial. So while we have some nations that are prospering, their economy is growing, and some other economies are not prospering, they are struggling, they are having difficulties. Here we have the answer as twofold. So some contributing factors are related to some economic development that's within a particular economy, and some other factors that related to the economic model that that governs the overall activity within this economy. So when we have an economic model that have the ability to support and to promote current and future activity. So the economic system that provide a stable economic growth environment, economic system that ensures that businesses and economic management systems are in place to support some sort of an organized approach to economic development. Now we have a system that's able to stabilize the economy, that able to promote economic activities. And we have some factors affecting the ability of the economic system to promote and support the current and future economic activities, such as the political system. Is it stable or not? Do we have the needed infrastructure? And also the debt levels. Are these levels within acceptable limits, or they are outside acceptable limits? Do we have an efficient banking system? Can we manage inflation level? Do we have a strong monetary policies? Do we have a strong central bank? Do we have a strong natural resource base? Do we have as a competitive force in the global market? Do we have an advantage or not? Do we have a comparative and competitive advantage or not? The government debt is a key indicator of a responsible fiscal policy. So the debt to GDP ratio is very, very important to understand if it is showing some upward movement, some upward tendency, or this means that, okay, it is improving over the years. The federal government needs to effectively manage the cash consumption. They call it cash consumption tendency. So how much the federal government activities will cost the government. The more we have upward movement, this indicates that we are able to borrow, and also this borrowing has a cost, like interest. And in Canada, our Canadian banking system is considered to be one of the most efficient and technology-savvy banking systems in the world. So we managed to keep our inflation levels within acceptable limits, especially in the recent years, by designing and enforcing monetary policies and actions. And of course, the central bank, the Bank of Canada, is the responsible entity for such monetary policies. So that's why we have a strong, fair, equitable legal system. We try to minimize the corruption, and whether in the public or the private sector. And of course, our strong natural resource base also is adding some comparative advantage to the country when it comes to commodities and energy market sectors. So what are the factors contributing to the overall economic development in any country? We have factors like political stability. We have the manageable levels of national debt, the established factors of production. We have national monetary policies and banking system. We have sufficient levels of investment. We have low inflation, absence of corruption, effective legal system, and comparative advantage. When we compare or assess Canada or the Canadian economic system against these factors, we will find that Canada has the critical elements to support and grow its economic system. So they have a stable political system, and of course we have all the necessary factors of production, infrastructure. We have roads, we have ports, we have utility systems, and of course we have one of the most educated and sophisticated workforces in the world. We have also technology-based management system that enables our businesses to manage its operation in efficient and effective way. We have also efficient system of delivery of goods and services. Until recently, we had a relatively acceptable national and provincial debt levels, but recently this was not the case. So the past several decades, we experienced higher national and provincial debt levels, but still we are still within the acceptable limits. And the governments, because we have two tiers of governments, we have federal government, we have provincial governments, and these governments are working together to effectively manage the debt loads, and they are trying to balance our work to stimulate growth, but at the same time to keep fiscally responsible and manage the debts in an acceptable way to support our future generations. So as I said, Canada has a comparative advantage. So why we possess this advantage? Comparative advantage is the ability of a country to produce goods, services at a lower cost than other countries. And also we have resources and unique services that's not available in other countries. And also in Canada, we have a very strong foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment happens when a company or individual from another country invests in Canada in a business or in a sector. So this investment could be as a physical ownership of an asset or purchasing a significant interest or part of the operation of that business. And foreign direct investment is an important source for direct investments, having a long-term capital for the country, and this long-term source of capital can aid the economy to develop and to support the underlying technical and working asset structure, supporting different sectors in the economy. And what makes Canada so attractive to foreign investments is the stability of the Canadian economy, the stability of the political system. And of course, having this stability is very, very important within the complex global environment that are there now. And although we had some decrease in foreign direct investments in recent years, and this is because of the downward investment trends, especially in the energy sector, and we are moving away from the petro economy, and also the uncertainty associated with our agreement, our North American Free Trade Agreement with the US that included Mexico in the recent update of the agreement, and the US exerting more increasing protectionist policies. Still, investment in Canada and the Canadian economy is still active, and the US, the European countries, the Asian countries are also active investors in the Canadian market. And recently, Europe is representing a third of the overall investment, while Asian countries represent approximately 13%. And this means that investors, foreign investors, considered Canada as a lucrative, stable, safe investment ground. To understand the economic environment, we need to understand the underlying economic model. So we have fundamental market composition principles that affect the underlying economic model. The law of supply and demand, allowance for private ownership, entrepreneurship, and wealth creation policies. Also the extent of government influence that influencing and managing the economic activity within the country and its direction. These factors affect the ability of the economic model to grow, to enable the growth of the economy, to develop, to foster an environment or a climate that promotes and rewards economic risks, taking risks, being entrepreneur, have a balanced relationship between the government and the private sector. First factor is the law of supply and demand. This law refers to the ability of the market, independent of external influences. So it's freely is able to determine the price for which a product or service to be sold. And law of supply and demand is the core of an open economic system. So on one hand, demand reflects the number of buyers or purchasers who are willing to pay for a specific product or service at specific price point. On the other hand, demand can be perceived to be elastic or inelastic. How? It depends on the movement in the quantity demanded by the purchaser or the buyers for different price points. And the producers are offering the products or the services at these different price points. We have inelastic demand when the movement in price doesn't affect significantly the change in demand. For example, the change in gasoline prices will not affect the demand because everyone that owns a vehicle needs gasoline. So no matter how the prices go up or down, it will not affect the demand. On the other hand, we have elastic demand when the quantity demanded goes up or down significantly related to the changes in price. For example, some devices, wearable devices, when it's not necessarily an important commodity like gasoline, for example. So when the price changes, when we have more suppliers offering these wearable devices at different price points, this will impact the demand. More people will be encouraged to buy these wearable devices. In some cases, suppliers are willing to offer a certain number of products or service offering. So they keep this limited number of products offered to keep the prices within certain level. And it depends on their ability to make a profit, a certain profit within these levels. However, when the suppliers are willing to provide a large quantity at a specific price, this might also maximize the profit potential. So together, supply and demand form the basis for this law, the law of supply and demand, which defines the relationship between the quantity of a certain product demanded and the quantity supplied by the manufacturer or the suppliers. And within the supply and demand curves, we have a point that's called the equilibrium point. And this represents price equilibrium. So at this point, the quantity of the products or services supplied equal the quantity demands with the price point set by this equalization. At this point, the market is in perfect equilibrium. So at this state of a perfect equilibrium, we don't have a shortage or a surplus of products. Whatever the quantity offered or supplied, it's demanded, it's purchased, it's taken at this specific price point. But when the price goes up, the willingness of the buyer or the purchaser goes down. They are not willing to buy when the prices goes up. So when this happens, without any other influences, the market has the ability to go to this equilibrium status again. So the prices are pushed down, so the purchaser or the buyers are willing again to buy the product. And this law affects the market ability to move totally in free. So when we say that it's a free market, it means that the market had the ability to allow prices to be set in such manner that it goes freely without any other external influence. However, this is not the case in all markets. We might have some influencers, some influencing factors like or some other external mechanism like duties, tariffs, subsidies, policies and regulations. In some other economic settings or other markets, it's truly the law of supply and demand that's governing this economic setting, and it plays a bigger role in setting the actual price, because we also have other factors. These factors might be related to the consumer themselves, like the consumer income, the consumer preferences, the number of products or services that substitute. How is there any alternative options available in the market for me as a consumer? We might have some innovation, some technology improvements. These factors will affect the relationship between supply and demand, especially when we analyze the market for a certain product or service or even a sector over a long time. Another factor that's very, very important, how this economic system, the underlying economic system, allows for private enterprises. What are the rights given to private enterprises? How this system allows for private ownership, entrepreneurship, wealth creation. So if the market is open to support, encourage, foster a climate for the growth of the private sector, do we promote the concepts of personal ownership? Do we promote the concepts, and we have some policies that enable individuals to create wealth? And of course, we have varying degrees here. We have some economies that inhibit the ability of private enterprising, and some economies that private enterprising flourish within these markets. And also it depends on the risk versus return. So in United States and Canada, these economies fully support the concept in a climate of accepting risk. Whenever you have a risk, you have bigger return. Developing economies such as China or India, they are allowing greater access to these fundamentals, but some other countries like North Korea, they don't provide this strong support. This support is considered part of capitalism. We have three systems here. We have fully open system, we have controlled or planned system, and we have mixed economic system. The three factors affecting the type of system, the economy that governs the economy, are three. The law of supply and demand allows for private ownership, entrepreneurship, and wealth creation, and the extent of government involvement. So government involvement also influence the overall economic activity, and it also affects the direction of the economic growth. So the government can play different roles, whether it's related to day-to-day economic activities or the overall arching policies of the economy. For example, the government can act as a customer. Why? Because they can purchase goods and services. Also, the government can act as a regulator. So the policies and the regulation of the government can restrict access or define competitive boundaries within particular sectors. Also, the government can act as a manager. So they have a power granted to what is called crown organizations. Here in Canada, they are called crown organizations, like the Bank of Canada, and I will mention other crown organizations later. So these crown organizations, they act as a manager and they have certain powers. Also, the government can act as a taxation agent. And also through grants and subsidies, the government can be a stimulator, an economic stimulator. So the government puts in place some grants, subsidies, and of course infrastructure development programs, some attention to a specific industry, or they have a bailout programs that support companies. And in some cases, the government can act as a competitor. So the government, when they provide services in direct competition to private sector in businesses, they become a competitor. Here in Canada, the underlying economic system is a mixed system. So we have components of the open system and the controlled or planned system. So we have the law of supply and demand influence the market, and we have, of course, private ownership, we have encouragement for entrepreneurship, and we have some educational programs, some services provided by the government through small business bureaus, small business centers in every and each city. And we have policies for wealth creation, and the Canadian government is very, very active in the economic activity and movement. Depending on the economic equilibrium that the government is aiming to do, we talked about these different systems. Consider it as a continuum. On one end of the continuum, we have fully open system. It's an economic system that adheres to total economic freedom. They adhere to the law of supply and demand. It has open access to private ownership, entrepreneurship, wealth creation, and there is minimal or sometimes no regulation on the part of government. On the other end of the continuum, we have controlled systems. These are economic systems which the private ownership, entrepreneurship, and wealth creation are largely restricted or sometimes totally absent, and the government controls everything related to the economic direction and activity. Mixed systems, like the Canadian system, has components from both. It includes at its core the principle of economic freedom, but we still have a degree of centralized economic banning, and the government issue regulations, and the government is involved. And most developed economies are considered mixed economic systems. So we allow the law of supply and demand, we allow investments, we allow foreign investments, and we create some sort of open market environment. And to create this freedom, the government endorse and support principles of free movement of labor, free movement of capital, free trade. And also there is a relationship between economic freedom and healthy societies, taking care of the environment, cleaner environment, overall economic growth. So because Canada possesses a stable business climate, we have a strong commerce system, global trading. We have supporting institutions to the private sector. Of course, we have a very strong and responsible banking system, and we have well-managed policies and regulations in place. The Canadian society has certain attributes. We are known to be honest, responsible, and our government is responsive and plays a significant influence in the market. And the government depends a cooperative, competitive model. So the government participates when they feel it's the benefit to the market as a whole and the consumer, and also in certain situations the government will become less engaged when it is the best to or the best interest for our nation is just to protect and regulate certain industries or guide economic initiatives without being in direct competition. So through taxation, regulation, and keeping specific national debt targets and provisional transfer and monetary policy control, the government can work in favor to the nation.